Hi, I'm Lisa Fletcher, and you're in the stream. Here's a question. Would you work for free if it meant making valuable connections in your career? Today we talk about unpaid interns. Is it abuse or a rite of passage? Our digital producer, Malika Bilal, here looking out for all your live feedback. Malika, Twitter has exploded with members of our community talking about this since we posted it first yesterday. And it seems there's no consensus even within the intern community.
No consensus at all, and they're definitely divided. But everyone can relate to this, which is why everyone's kind of chiming in. Yeah. So we asked our community to finish the phrase, "my unpaid internship," and they did. This one's from Kenya. Najiro says, "My unpaid internship was backbreaking. Interning for the Kenyan government is a thankless undertaking." And one more from Johanna, who says, "My unpaid internship was better than no internship at all. No pay equals less expectation, a period to learn as much as you can." Now, for those of you at home, whether you were an intern or not, join the conversation by using the hashtag AJStream.
And joining us in the studio is Eric Zabayos, Deputy Director of the International Labor Organization here in Washington, D.C. Eric, welcome to the stream.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
You bet. We're also looking forward to hearing from you. You can send your comments, questions, and even suggest some future show topics on our Facebook page. Just like us at facebook.com/AJStream, and you too can be in the stream.
My name is Jamila. I'm from Calgary, Canada, and I use social media to keep on top of current events in Ghana. And I'm in the stream.
And she's adorable. Every year, millions of young people find themselves vying for positions as they enter the workforce for the first time. And the competition is fierce. One option for both students and graduates is to take an unpaid internship. Now, those in favor say it's an experience that can lead to valuable connections and a pathway in their field of choice. Others say they work hard for very little to no pay with little benefit. It turns out that in the U.S. and the U.K., many companies are actually breaking the law by illegally using interns. It's a serious subject, but it's also the topic of some funny rants on social media by current and former interns. Here's one sarcastic take on how a person should prepare for an unpaid internship.
Step 1. Ditch the plastic, which can cost a fortune in interest. When you spend cash, you can see it disappearing, which tends to limit spending. Step 2. Write down all of your expenses in a ledger to prioritize expenditures and keep track of your spending. The organization and discipline will come in handy later when you have some money to manage. Many websites offer free money management and budgeting software. Step 3. Volunteer to clean up after meetings or office luncheons, which often involve fancy food that just gets tossed. Snag some free food, coffee, and donuts while you're at it. Waste not, want not.
Well, there wasn't much written on the topic of internships until it was tackled by our next guest, Ross Perlin. He's the author of the book Intern Nation, and he spent several years researching intern culture. He joins us via Skype from New York. Also joining us is Gus Baker. He joins us from London. He is the co-director of Intern Aware. That is a professionally funded organization that advocates for fair treatment of interns in the UK. Thanks to everyone for being here. Ross, I want to start with you. For decades, college kids have been taking part in unpaid internship programs as an opportunity to gain a little hands-on experience in their field of interest, with plenty of kids, holding down part-time jobs in addition to their internship. Why is this such a big deal now?
What's changed, Lisa, is how widespread a phenomenon interning has become. The term internship itself does go back about a century, but it originally referred only to medical students who had just graduated from medical school and were in a sort of short transitional period. They were paid, but they had to do a lot of dirty work before they could fully enter the profession of medicine. And it sort of slowly grew over the course of the 20th century, but even as recently as 1980, according to the best survey that we have from the time, only a very small minority, something like 3 or 4% of college students were doing an internship before they graduated. Now the number is closer to 75% in the US. And we've also seen the phenomenon go global. This is something that was really sort of hatched in America and has now spread, as we've heard, to the UK, to Western Europe in general, increasingly to Asia and Africa as well. So what's really happened in the last few decades is what I call the internship explosion, where this has become common practice. It's seen in every field, every white-collar field certainly, and at companies of all shapes and sizes at nonprofits and government offices as well. So now it really has become a kind of standard operating procedure and something that's a virtual requirement, a hurdle for just about anybody who wants to enter the white-collar workforce, which is increasingly where well-paid jobs are.
Hey, Eric, how much of this is a function of a globally depressed economy where actual jobs are getting replaced with the work of interns?
What we observe at the ILO is that during very severe economic downturns, there is an increase of number of on this type of options for the people, but they are part of a coping mechanism as well. We've observed in Europe, for example, during the recent crisis, that many governments opted for these mechanisms to avoid layouts of their staff. In order to preserve the jobs of the people, they offer apprenticeships or any training experience that may keep them, so when the conditions will improve, they will get back easily to job. So on that side, that is one element. But on the other side, there is a huge concern when the crises are severe and the jobs recovery are slow, like the one that we are observing here in the US. In that case, there are not enough jobs simply to get all the people that is finishing the school into jobs.
And that's something that we're seeing among our community. There's not enough jobs out there. Now, Gus, Lisa mentioned this a little bit earlier at the top of the show, that there's disagreement even among interns. We're seeing it here on Twitter. Interns are in the business to acquire skill plus experience and a chance to prove their worth. They're not there to make salaries. Another tweet, actually the way I see it, it's like working to pay for tuition. I'm unskilled, and why would I get paid to make mistakes? But then that's countered by this video comment. Gus, have a listen.
Hi, my name's Joel, I'm from the UK, and my comment on internships is that they used to be about gaining skills and they used to lead to a job. Now, that's not the case anymore. There's no guarantee of that at all. You can do internship after internship and never get into a real job. That is exploitative in nature because you can also not pay for food or rent. It's taking smart people and not paying them anything.
Gus, he says it's exploitative, but does it depend on the field that you're in?
It definitely depends on the field, but it's not just exploitative, it's also exclusive. Only a small amount of people can afford to do work for long periods of time and not be paid. It's extremely expensive to live in the capital cities where internships are based, and to pay rent, to pay bills, to try and pay for your transport around while you don't have a salary. Well, only a few people can do that. And that means there's swathes of talented, bright, hard-working people who get left out. That's certainly the situation in the UK, and from what I hear, it's the situation right across the world now.
Malika, your question was, does it depend on your field of interest? And something that's come up in our research for this show is that the intensely competitive fashion industry is actually notorious for having unpaid internships, especially in the UK, where hundreds of thousands of young people work for free just to try to get a leg up on the competition. Here is one former intern with her story.
I was paid on the PR internship I did. I got paid for food and expenses, but that's it. I mean, I didn't get paid for my time there, which is obviously what's normal or considered normal. At the magazine, I was told that I would get a certain amount a week, which didn't cover my costs for like one day, let alone a week. And when I left, I gave them my details and I never got paid. But I felt that I didn't want to. I emailed them once to say, look, here's my details again, just in case you didn't get them. But then nothing came of it. They didn't email back, and I didn't want to keep badgering them because I had a good time there and I don't want to jeopardize any connections I made.
Gus, I want to go back to you, a couple things there. One, let's talk about the fashion industry and how many unpaid interns are actually working within it in the UK. And secondly, that commenter was not the only one who wanted to remain anonymous. In fact, she was afraid that if she showed her face, it would actually damage her opportunities for future employment. So talk a little bit about this fear among interns about speaking out about what they consider, bad circumstances.
I mean, when you're trying to get into an industry where you think everyone talks about the interns, everyone talks about who they're hiring, who's good, who's not so good, it can be terrifying to stand up for your right to be paid a fair wage. In the fashion industry, there's lots of money around. It's not because there's lack of money, this problem, but because so many people are willing to work for free, you have designers who are taking advantage of young people. One person who contacted us, and they were too afraid to give us their name, they said that they'd been working at a major fashion house and they'd been walking the owner's dog and cleaning up after it did its business in the street, and they were doing that unpaid day after day, work that wasn't helping them in their career, but they were too afraid to quit in case they got a bad reference, and they were far too afraid to speak out. It's not good enough, and something needs to be done about it.
And this seems to be a catch-22 that our community is mentioning. There's a tweet here that says fresh graduates are constantly required to have work experience. But how are we expected to gain work experience if we've never been employed? Let's go to our hangout now, where Emily Mithner is the founder of New York Creative Interns. Emily, you've had 6 internships.
Yes, hi. Hi, thanks for having me, everyone. So my question is for Eric. And I'm just wondering, within your role, if there's been any research to whether or not unpaid internships versus paid internships actually lead to full-time employment. Through running New York Creative Interns, we see that internships are almost essential to getting that full-time employment and the experience. And we were just wondering if you had any numbers or research that has shown the correlation or a different correlation between paid versus unpaid. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there have been several efforts to try to identify the impact of these programs. We've been observing at the ILO some of the experiences and lessons learned from other countries, and what we found is that internships, when they are well defined, when they serve the purpose, when they are part of a training program, when they have proper supervision and guidance, and are for the benefit of the intern, those had proven to be very effective and efficient in the main objective they are serving. They have helped people to gain the experience that they were looking for, and often they ended up on benefiting in a job. Now, it needs to be very clear that internships are not jobs. And when you hear many of the comments, there seems to be an expectation of people when they apply to an internship that they will immediately get a job. And that's not exactly the purpose of this. Is to gain the experience, is to gain the skills that otherwise are not accrued when you are studying at the university or in college. And they provide you the opportunity to expand further your skills and try those in a real working setting. If those programs are well developed, well supervised, they are likely to be more effective. Those that are not, and are basically using people for replacing core workers' functions or duties, obviously will get more frustration than what we are expecting from these programs.
You mentioned the skills that they're gaining. People are picking up on that. Julia on Twitter says, this is totally unfair. I have had about a dozen internships and I never learned tangible skills. Skelly says, I've done unpaid internships in design. Some taught me minimally, others had me doing menial tasks. And Ross, there's another one from Tim who says, even paid workplaces in Nigeria, he references, rarely provide opportunities for staff trainings and improvement. Ross, there's one more, a video comment. Have a listen.
This is not just something that students are sacrificing in terms of income, but also in terms of opportunities, in terms of job experience, which is required for recent college graduates. Many entry-level jobs come with expectations of at least 1, 2, even 3 or 4 internships. A friend of mine was unable to do any internships during his undergraduate experience and suffered a great deal in terms of trying to find a job, and remains unemployed a year after graduating from college.
Ross, your thoughts?
I want to pick up on several themes that I think just came up in those comments, and also in Emily's question and what Eric was saying. These are not, the internships of a generation ago. As I said, not only were internships a lot more unusual back then, more of a sort of minority experience and more concentrated in the US at particular kinds of companies, they were much more likely to be paid, they were much more likely to be training heavy in the kind of way that Eric is talking about. These days, the term internship is used so broadly that many internships really are jobs, and you are doing the work of what would be regular workers, things that used to be paid roles. Unpaid internships have a tendency to chase paid internships off the road, and that's increasingly what we've seen through good times and bad times. The economic recession, economic downturn certainly make it more severe, but that's not the whole explanation. This has been going on, and I've been researching this since before the economic crisis happened. So it's a wider phenomenon which is at work. In regard to the last couple of comments that we just heard, paid internships tend to do better for people across, a whole range of factors than unpaid ones, and that actually is a good way, Emily, to kind of there was a study that was recently done, kind of assessing the effectiveness of internships in getting a full-time job. Basically, the paid ones make a difference, and the unpaid ones don't. And the phenomenon of people being serial interns, having to do one after another, doing them for longer periods of time. These things are all becoming more common in the last, decade or so, and especially the last few years.
Yeah,
So
Ross, I want to
seeing
pick
is
up on
really
this
kind of,
idea that you're talking about in terms of the opportunity that comes with paid internships. Some people say that internships are discriminatory because they're only really available for people who can afford to work for free. There was a recent Gawker article on the subject, and it said in part, unpaid internships, essentially part-time jobs that pay nothing, are an incredible hardship for students without money. So, Ross, do unpaid internships actually exclude kids who don't have the financial wherewithal to be able to afford to work for free?
Absolutely, Lisa, and that in some ways is sort of the biggest issue for us as a society, or for the broader public when looking at internships. It's the fact that, in some ways they are the face of privilege. There's an exploitative aspect as well for individual interns going through it. But the overall pattern, we need to think about is actually who doesn't even get to sort of do these things, who can't pay to play in this kind of pay to play system. It costs, as Ben was saying, it can cost thousands of dollars to be able to do a summer internship. It's not just a matter of not being paid. So what we're seeing over time is the complexion of professions changing. Those professions where you have to be able to do one or two or multiple internships increasingly sort of leave aside and don't have that kind of socioeconomic diversity in them that we would want to see. So the issues around inequality and social mobility are among the most kind of important when you look at internships.
Well, I want to get back to our hangout in a second, but of course we would be remiss if we didn't mention that the stream has interns, 4 of them who are on my screen right now: Mona, Sarah, Frank, and Osman. Their work is invaluable to us. But I want to go now to a student who's also been an intern in our hangout, Jay Stoll, who's a student of international relations in the UK. Go ahead, Jay.
Hi, my question's for Gus. You'll know so well at Intern Aware that the problems students are facing, ranging from EMAs being strapped, tuition fees being hiked, landlords arbitrarily raising rent. These are all massive problems. So in that context, because Intern Aware has now laid the foundations that we need to lobby governments, is it now time to kind of end the exploitation that's completely embedded in unpaid internships, and find legislation that delineates between what work experience is and what unpaid internships are? Because if that is delineated, then we can really make progress on this.
Gus, want to tackle that?
Absolutely, and here's the thing, in the UK and the US at least, unpaid internships where people are doing real work and the employer's not paying them, that's against the law. I saw a major magazine advertise for a receptionist intern to work for 6 months for no money, being a receptionist. Now, that's a real job that someone should be being paid for, and were that intern to have taken their employer to court after the internship, in the UK at the very least, they'd have definitely won that case. Now, what we've got to make sure is that people understand the difference between an internship where you're doing work and work shadowing. If you're just shadowing someone, you're following someone around, seeing what an office is like, no, maybe you don't have a right to be paid. But the vast majority of interns are doing real work, they're contributing to an organisation, and because they are, they should be paid for it.
But Ross, couldn't one argue that that real work is part of the real experience, giving them a taste of what their chosen field is, and they are learning some invaluable lessons and skills in being a part of that, rather than just making photocopies or fetching coffee or taking the dog for a walk?
Of course, it's very hard to delineate exactly, where that line is between training and between, doing work that actually contributes. And so, it's a challenge that I think you have to take on a case-by-case basis. In the US, we have a kind of 6-factor test, which is kind of widely circulated on the internet. If you Google, illegal internships or something like that, you'll find this kind of 6-point test, which similar to in the UK, is meant to kind of try to figure out where that line is and decide whether an internship is illegal. But unfortunately, it's true in the US, as Gus was saying for the UK, that the vast majority of unpaid internships at for-profit companies are not bona fide training programs. They involve, too much real work where you are making a contribution to the bottom line of that firm, and that is a paid position. So it's a very fine and difficult line, but I would encourage anybody who's interning, has interned recently, is thinking about it, just to take a moment to take a look at that 6-point test. It should be kind of posted in offices, I think, and colleges that have internship programs should make it known, but they haven't been doing so unfortunately. So it's up to people to know their own rights.
What's the incentive for organizations to have internship programs?
Internship programs historically were kind of about training and recruitment. As I said, early internships were mostly paid, and the idea was that you wanted the most talented, young people from the up-and-coming generation to come work at your firm and learn the skills and be interested in working there, going forward. It was an investment that was made kind of on both sides. It wasn't a high salary, but it was something you could live off of. You didn't have to support yourself by bartending all night or doing something else on the side to pay the bills. Now, unfortunately, increasingly firms are using it as a way to get sort of unpaid, flexible labor, keep labor costs down in tough times. When they have a hiring freeze on, they'll still be bringing on interns to pick up extra workload. It's used for kind of seasonal bumps where there's more work to be done. But ideally, companies should be seeing it, and the good ones do. I mean, the sort of like, Googles and Microsofts of the world, their internships are well paid and have a lot of training in them. And they're seeing it as an investment, and they want to hire, and they typically do, half or even 3/4 of those in their intern class.
I think our community is seeing it as an investment too, but they keep, I don't want to say harping, but they're picking up on the point that it's for the elites. That's what MC2 says. Only the elites get into certain sectors. Another tweet from Ali who says, when I worked in DC, there definitely was a class and race breakdown of who interned for us. How many people can afford $150 a week in DC? Now, Jay, at our Hangout, I know you have a follow-up on this issue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, for me, unpaid internships are completely exclusive in terms of, I'm from Manchester in the north of England, and if I want an internship in London during the summer, I've got to fork out a ridiculous expense for that. There are huge problems with social immobility in unpaid internships, and the barriers they create for the poorest in our country for their desired professions, their ambitions, and the amount they're already paying to get qualifications from university. I mean, it's just putting up a giant wall for people. I don't understand how people can really argue that this so-called experience, which I personally believe is more unstructured than if you were paid, is somehow worth denying people fundamental opportunities. It just goes way over my head, that argument.
Eric, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I think we agree with the concerns that are expressed in terms that there's increased number of people that is frustrated because of the results of the internships. They are frustrated because they are not being paid, but I think the frustration is not because they are not paid, because they are not getting what they're supposed to be getting, the experience, they get the skills, and the opportunity to further continue a job. Now,
one quick question just to clarify for our viewers, because a lot of people are thinking, well, if I'm getting college credit, that is in lieu of payment, right? So it's either you're getting college credit or you're getting paid.
Yeah.
It's one of those two things.
I think young people need to understand what they are getting when they go into an internship, and I agree with Ross in that regard, is that they need to be clear that they are doing something that is connected with the subject that they are studying. Otherwise, it won't be meaningful. They will feel that what they are doing is a waste of time. Most of the colleges have programs that are designed so as to provide the complementarity between what the main subject of the study will be and the areas in which they can internship.
Okay, I'm going to stop you right there. We're going to pick up this conversation in our online post show. So go to stream.aljazeera.com and we're going to continue things. Stick around. Hey, welcome back. This is the Post Show at stream.aljazeera.com. We're talking about the ethics of an unpaid internship where you're not getting any college credit and you're not getting any money. Want to jump back into the conversation out to Gus Baker, who's the co-director of Intern Aware in the UK. Gus, in the UK, Parliament right now is debating what's called the Internship Act. They're going to decide on this next month. It would ban the advertisement of unpaid internships. If that passes, how do you see that legislation targeting internships?
Well, we persuaded a fantastic MP, Hazel Blears, to take this piece of legislation into the UK Parliament. And what the Act would do was, it's currently illegal to employ someone and ask them to work for free, but it's not illegal to advertise that you're going to employ someone and ask them to work for free. So what we're saying is that the government body, HMRC, that's supposed to enforce our minimum wage law, what they should do is, when they see an advert for an unpaid intern, they should get on the phone to that organisation and remind them that if they were to take on someone on those terms, that they'd likely be breaking the law. And the thing I'd say to everyone watching is, what a waste unpaid internships are. What a waste for clever, bright people who could really add something to organisations to be stuck not being able to afford to work for free and stuck out of the careers that were right for them.
Well, Emily, in our Hangout, he called it a waste, and you just tweeted us saying students who realize the importance of internships will plan ahead, working through school, being an RA, etc., to make it happen. Emily?
Sure. So we have talked to, through New York Creative Interns, lots of different people who have really realized that these internships and experiences are really important, especially in the creative fields, which is what we focus on. And I've met tons and tons of hardworking students who really put the effort in to, regardless of their financial background, make it happen by working jobs, being an RA, staying with family after graduation. That's what I did and how I was able to take on unpaid internships after graduation, which were actually extremely beneficial and definitely were integral in landing my full-time job and what I'm doing currently now. So one of my questions for Eric might be, are you seeing efforts at a really broad scale in terms of helping students and interns actually realize how to get the most out of internships? Because what we see is a lot of issues where students don't realize the value of networking and those contacts, and they don't take advantage of it, and then they leave and feel like they got nothing out of it.
I think, Emily, you are right. I mean, it a lot depends on the dialogue that keeps going on between the students, the universities, and actually even the employers' organizations who have a stake on this. Employers know very well what kind of profile they want to have in their offices, in their jobs. Universities need to adapt the formation of those skills to those requirements, so then the students that are pursuing something will be fitting more precisely to the needs that the market is looking for. When there is a dialogue and there are well-designed programs, those results are likely to be more effective and more beneficial for the students. Unfortunately, as it was said, there are many other cases in which people is just calling for internships, looking for additional hands to help them in the work, and that's not beneficial and not fair for people. And if it is not paid, it's even worse. The ILO has a very strong policy on this regard. We pay to our interns not a salary, but we pay a stipend that helps them with some of the costs. And we encourage the same with the state members. We encourage to our state members to put safeguards that are going to protect the interns from these abusive or free labor options that we are seeing.
Well, in places where there isn't necessarily that framework, there are some other ways that people who are fighting on behalf of interns are trying to get some results. One way is that Intern Aware, which is Gus's organization, it targets companies through traditional and social media, doing what's called naming and shaming of offenders. Just a few days ago, the Evening Standard in London singled out the British Film Institute, writing, "The British Film Institute has been accused of using unpaid interns to fill the gap after it axed nearly a fifth of its workforce." Gus, for those of us outside the UK, explain this idea of naming and shaming, and does it really work? Have you seen any companies actually change the way they deal with interns based on things like this?
Well, absolutely it works. Companies are worried about their reputations, and so we get the anonymous feedback of interns who contact us, and we say to those companies, hey, you're breaking the law and you have to pay your interns. So Yahoo, a massive global company that can obviously afford to pay its interns, well, they posted an unpaid internship advert, and we created such a noise on social media that by emailing them and by keeping tweeting them, they changed their mind and they agreed to stop using unpaid interns. And that's happened again and again in the UK. And so where there are those campaigning organisations like there are here, they should be used to really make sure that those companies who are breaking the law and who are exploiting young people know that how unhappy their customers are about it.
Well, let's hear from one of those interns, former interns, I should say. This is a video comment.
Hi, my name is Geneva, and I have a degree in International Relations and Human Rights. Right now, I can't afford an unpaid internship, so I work full-time at a running shoe store.
That's a view from California, but I want to go to our hangout because Jay has a follow-up. Jay?
Yeah, I've got a follow-up for Gus based on the naming and shaming thing, which I genuinely think does work. Like, I know Intern Aware last year did work with NUS and LSE, my students' union, on things like Calvin Klein, which is really important. But my last internship was actually at a charitable organisation, which I don't want to name, but it was unpaid. But some people might be uncomfortable with naming and shaming them. So clearly a different strategy is needed, because I still personally think that interns are interns and they should be paid. You know, there are heads of charities who earn hundreds of thousands of pounds. So I think people should be paid, but, you know, there's quite a few people who'd be uncomfortable with naming and shaming charities, so I just wanted to know your thoughts on that as well.
Now, what I'd say to charities is that they do have an exemption in the law so that people can do voluntary work for them. But if charities want the best and the brightest people to come work for them, to come and drive their organisations forward, then they need to be able to pay people a fair wage so that people can afford to take those jobs. And the charity sector, like many other sectors, tries to improve society and tries to reflect society. And so if it's just got a few people from very narrow backgrounds in, it can't do its job properly. So I would encourage charities to make sure they prioritise paying their workers, their most junior workers, the interns, a fair wage, because it's good for them in the long run.
But Gus, doesn't this kind of change the whole idea of an internship? I mean, you're using words like jobs and driving the organization forward. That's the job of a paid, experienced staff person, not somebody who is still in college, learning the ropes, who may not necessarily have the experience or the historical knowledge to make those kinds of decisions. So doesn't it sort of take away from the internship experience when you have that kind of pressure on a young person?
I mean, in the UK, most interns have graduated from their degree already, and I think the same is true in the US. And young people can bring bright new ideas into an organisation. They can suggest new things that they wouldn't have done otherwise, and they can really reach out to new markets. If an organisation is trying to sell things to young people, who better to get on board than a young person as an intern, paying them a fair wage for their work and getting all their ideas so that they can move their business forward. It's a great model, paid internships, because it allows the intern to try out working at an organisation, and it allows the employer to see if that intern would fit there.
And often some of the most
opportunities.
Well, and often from our experience here, some of the most ambitious and creative people. Ross, we've got about 30 seconds left. I want you to wrap this up for us, if you will.
I think we've had a great discussion, kind of, you know, bridging the whole range of views on this issue. You know, what's I think become clear is that in the last few years, really for the first time, people are starting to question the culture of unpaid work we have, the way that it's blocking opportunities for many people who don't have the money to work for free. And we're understanding that we need to sort of challenge this and discuss this issue and kind of make a more equitable system for people to break into the workforce.
All right, thanks to our guests Eric Zabayos, Ross Perlin, and Gus Baker, and of course another big thanks and shout out to all of our interns at the Scream. You guys are fantastic. For the rest of you, we'll see you online at stream.aljazeera.com.